And not to worry, this your faces won't be in it too, so feel free to, show your face if you would like. But hi, my name is Alejandra Peña. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm the advising and outreach manager for the Evans School here at the University of Washington. But today is not about me. It's about you all. So first of all, congratulations on your admission to the University of Washington. How exciting. But also, I'm here with my very special guest, all the way from our graduate funding and information session. Um, sorry, let me repeat that. Graduate funding and information service program, Michelle. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and keep folks back into our Zoom room here, but I'm going to go ahead and send it on over to Michelle.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle, like Alejandra said. I am currently a graduate student in the Masters of Library and Information Science program, and I am also the Graduate Funding Information Service Manager, or GFIS, as we say, because we're all about acronyms in the library. Um, I am located on campus and I also do in-person and online consultations, although they are currently full for winter quarter. But starting in spring, I will have more of those. Um, I am going to share my screen with you and walk through the research guide that my office has, which has information about different types of funding. And then I'll go through some timelines and then also some search strategies and some things that I have found helpful. Feel free to shout out or enter into the chat any questions that you have. I can answer them as we go. There will also be time at the end to ask any questions, so don't worry about that. If you have questions also about like what it's like to be a student at UW, you can also ask me those, which that's totally fine because I am and I'm on campus a lot, so that's totally fine. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen here that says research guide in the top left-hand corner. Okay. Um, yes, you're welcome. Okay, so this is the main page of the research guide, and I'm going to put the link in the chat for you so that you can have it as well. Um, Okay, so there are three main links here in the center. The two that I'm going to speak in the most detail about is this first one here, assistantships, and then the second link here, scholarships, fellowships, and grants. There is some information on the menu bar on the left. I will note that the University of Washington has been going through a website update. And so I am currently going through checking all of my links. If you do encounter any dead links or incorrect, you can just send them to me in an email. But I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks, at least before the start of spring quarter, I will have found and fixed them all. But that is slightly a work in progress. That's been a really fun thing for us. Also on this main page, under the second area, available help, you can schedule an appointment with me. Those are the consultations that I told you about, which will be available starting spring quarter. Also, you can send me an email. There's a link here in the center or down here on the right-hand side underneath the icon. There's a link. That email is gfis@uw.edu. So just GFIS at UW. And then there's some other information, but primarily we're going to talk about these two. And so I am going to start with assistantships. If you click on this link, it takes you to this page here that gives you some information about assistantships, some definitions and different things. Assistantships can come in three different categories and two different time lengths. So the categories are TA, which is teaching assistant, RA, which is research assistant, and SA, which is staff assistant. Staff assistants generally are more administrative in nature or student support, a lot of project management. So if you're looking for that type of experience, that might be something that's interesting to you. Generally, those positions are year long. And they can also be located in offices on campus that don't have students. So some of the other, like some of the library positions, some I know the like the UW Sella Center and a few other places can have those. The two different lengths are for 1 quarter and then for the whole academic year. All of those categories and types have the same benefits. So if it has a tuition waiver, it will, no matter what type it is, no matter how long it is, it will also have a monthly stipend, which is like a paycheck. And then you also qualify for student health insurance. Generally, I think TA teaching assistants will are more likely to be the quarter-long positions. Um, it can sometimes include summer quarter, but generally the year-long positions are from fall through spring. Um, any graduate student in any department is eligible for any assistantship that you see posted. Every now and then you'll see one maybe from the Department of Medicine or something like nursing or something like that, where they'll have some specific training or education requirements. Those are really kind of the only caveats to the anything. But aside from those in general, you can apply to any assistantship that you see available. So in general, you can see here, quarterly positions start being posted towards the end of the quarter before. So in late fall, like mid-November, you start seeing the positions that are available in winter quarter. In like late February, early March, you'll see them for spring. And then in mid-May-ish, you'll start seeing them for summer. Spring quarter is the exception because, in addition to summer positions, that's also when you start seeing the fall positions. And so, remembering that fall is when the year-long positions start, so you won't really see it a year-long position through the year. In May, going all the way through the summer and into September is when you'll see those year-long or quarterly fall positions. So that's the only time that it's really make a point of paying attention to how long it is and when it is, because it mixed in there will be the summer positions as well. So in general, there are two main places to find these positions on campus. Aside from the department specific ones, usually your department coordinator will email those opportunities to you, so you don't necessarily have to search for them. But otherwise, I would say the majority, like 98% of them at this point, are available on UW Handshake. They're where they're posted. You will have to register for class before you have access to UW Handshake. So if you're starting in the fall, that's usually in the third week of June is when you'll see that. So between mid-May and June, you will have to use other opportunities if you don't have access to Handshake. And then starting once you've registered, you can look for the rest of the summer on that site. One of the options is the GFIS blog, which is managed by my office. People will send me an email with the information and then I post it. If you sign up to receive notifications from the blog, you'll get a ping every time I post something. On the blog, I do post like scholarships and hourly positions and other things. So there's a range of things, not just assistantships that you can see. Research centers are generally where you're going to have your RA, your research assistantships. They don't necessarily tend to post them as broadly as other departments. So usually you'll have to locate the center itself doing the research that you're interested in and ask them if they have assistantships or look on their site to see if they have a student job opportunity page or something like that. So this third link goes to the list of research centers, not necessarily assistantships. And so those are your options. Quick things to note in the job description, it doesn't always say that it has tuition waiver, but generally it will have some of this information that you can use to kind of know that it is, even if it doesn't say. Like, for instance, they'll say that it's half time or 20 hours a week or 220 hours per quarter, particularly because hourly positions are usually only 19 hours a week. In addition, it will say it'll have a salary instead of an hourly dollar amount. That's kind of a guide. Um, the application process is usually that you send your resume and a cover letter to somebody in the department, and that is also the person that you can email if you have questions. So if you are looking at the job description and you really can't tell, you can always send that person an email to ask them specifically. Although I personally will apply anyway, and then I'll ask later because why not? So that is basically the overview of assistantships. Does anybody have any questions about those in particular before we move on?
I just wanted to confirm. So
Sure.
for the fall, if we're getting there, starting our first semester in the fall, we wouldn't be
Mhm.
able to see anything until mid-May and then handshake until mid-June.
So, yes, but it's not see anything. It's that they're just not posted until that time because they're not posted until the department is ready to hire for them. So you can certainly search on the blog and in other places. There just won't be any listed until probably mid-May.
Okay.
If there's any that are earlier, that's fine. But yes, you won't have access to Handshake until you've registered for fall. One way around that is if you know a certain department that you are interested in, you can contact them directly because usually either you're contacting the like department coordinator or the graduate advisor, or you can go on the website and see if they have a current student job page. Because in addition to posting on Handshake, they will generally post it on their website as well. So in between times, like starting mid-May until you can register, you can kind of do that workaround, but it just requires a little bit of extra searching for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. How competitive are these assistantships? So, and do I know what percentage of students take them? I don't know the percentage because generally people come to me for help searching, and then once they get the job, I never hear from them again. So I don't know. I do know that there is never an empty assistantship that no one has applied to, particularly because yes, they are very competitive. Um, and particularly because they have a tuition waiver. They are quite competitive. So one of the nice things is knowing that you can apply for any assistantship. You're not limited to your own department. The challenge, of course, is if you get a quarterly position, you will have to apply each quarter for the next one. One of the nice things about a quarterly position is sometimes departments or professors are um, less likely to hire somebody who can't prove or doesn't have a what demonstrated experience with doing similar work. And so doing something for a quarter is a little bit less like pressure than doing it for the whole year. So sometimes the quarterly positions will be slightly easier. I don't necessarily want to use the word easier, but they're also a little bit more numerous, particularly because assistantships are supporting classes. So there's a lot of like undergrad classes that you can be an assistant to. Places like the College of Education and the College of Arts and Sciences are very large. They have a lot of positions that you can apply for. Um, but yes, in general, they are competitive and it can be challenging. Yes, just completely honest. Yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Anybody else have the question? Okay, so I'm going to move on, remembering, of course, that you can ask me any question at any time and that there will be time at the end. So back on the main page again, if we click on the second link, which is scholarships, fellowships, and grants, it takes us to this page here, which has some information about some terms and different things. It has in the center these two columns that have links to external databases. So this is funding that is completely external to campus. It's not associated with campus. So these are scholarships that you can get no matter what school you're going to. And so the deadline periods are kind of arbitrary, partly because of that. Um, if you scroll down slightly, here's this other section that's really important, which is crafting search terms. So one of the challenges with these databases is that they are pretty basic and the search function is not super robust. So crafting your search terms becomes very important because that's how you find relevant information. Basically, they're doing a like word search through the summaries of these scholarships and grants and matching them exactly. So going in and using a lot of synonyms and modifying your search will be really important to help you try to get things that you can qualify for. Um, there are filtering options. I find the filters to be not precise enough. It tends to filter out some things that I may want to look through. And so I personally don't use the filters. I just work on my search terms. So this second bullet point here, consider the terms. So one, you can do your degree or program. Another is research interests and your field. So what you're researching and where you want to apply that information. And then personal, social, or cultural identity information. You can search for each one separately. You can combine them. Like if I were working in STEM and I was searching for myself, I would look for scholarships in STEM. I would look for scholarships for women, and I would look for scholarships for women in STEM. So you can combine them in different ways and just narrow the results differently as you're going through. I also will open a Excel spreadsheet where I keep track of what I'm applying for, what the requirements are, when the deadlines are, and I'll open up another tab and I will keep a list of the different columns as I'm searching. So if I'm searching for my degree or program, I'll try to limit my search terms to that field only so that when I'm doing my search and I'm going back and forth, it becomes a little less overwhelming if I'm being very precise in my search and I'm keeping track. And particularly that's helpful because the general recommendation is to search for maybe an hour once a week, maybe twice a week. Because scholarships will be listed even if they're closed, you're not looking for new opportunities. You're just refining your search to try to come up with different results. So the it's not necessarily pressing for you to search at a different time or search a little bit every day. So if I'm searching for an hour, generally I'll divide these keyword areas into like 20-minute sections. So I'll spend 20 minutes looking for the degree or program, then I'll switch to looking for my research interests and location. And so then that way it helps me manage like this is only what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm only looking for this amount of time, and that can keep you from getting overwhelmed. One of the other things that I'll do, because again, you'll see scholarships that don't have an application open. So if it's something that I qualify for and it's the application is in 4 months or 6 months, I'll make a note in my calendar with the link to that so that I can apply for it. And then I'm making my search easier ahead of time. So And the reason why that matters is because these external database searches, these scholarships are generally in two main periods. One is like mid-February-ish through the end of May, usually, a little bit into June sometimes. And then there's a smaller deadline period that's from about October to December or thereabouts. So now is a good time to do that search for fall quarter. So the deadline, the February to May-ish deadline, those are applications that will disperse in fall quarter. So each spring you're applying for the next year. The deadline period from October to December, that one sometimes has spring or summer dispersal, but often it will also be for fall. So most or all of your searching will be for the following academic year. So if you can do a lot of your searching ahead of time, like now, you can schedule things to apply for throughout the spring and then later in the fall so that you're not having to do your search and your apply at the same time. For scholarships, there is no upper limit to how much you can have. So anything that you find that you qualify for, go ahead and apply for it because the only thing that's limited is the amount of loans. And even if you are taking loans that cover your cost of attendance, if you get scholarships, it will just add on to that. And whatever's extra comes back to you as a refund. So there really is no upper limit. You can have any combination of funding. Even if you had an assistantship that gave you a tuition waiver and then you got a scholarship, you can still get that scholarship. It would just come back to you as a refund. Um, that being said, the amount of effort that goes into an application is pretty much the same, regardless of the dollar amount. So, very small ones will still require you to have two recommenders, personal statements, different things. So, that's just something to know that the very large ones, the very small ones, it will be the same. So, in addition to um, noting when the deadlines are, maybe letting recommenders know that, like, hey, we're coming into spring. I'm going to be applying for a lot of things. Like, do you want me to ask you every time I'm submitting an application, or do you just want me to put your name there? Just letting them know ahead of time because generally the applications are not considered complete until you have those recommenders. So if there's a recommender that has a hard time meeting deadlines, that might be something for you to consider because that will also determine whether you will qualify for that if you have your materials. Um, on this page also, if you continue scrolling, there is some sites with databases that is funding from the University of Washington, from campus. And so, specifically the Graduate School Office of Fellowships and Awards and the Office of Merit Scholarships, Fellowships and Awards. So in general, on-campus funding has a little bit more leeway in terms of that deadline period. So in general, it's like if you're searching the external funding sites, you can also be searching for the on-campus sites, but you may find that the deadlines or the open times are a little bit different. A lot of times they will be open over the summer and in the fall to disperse sometimes in spring. So that one, it is important to actually look at the deadline and dispersal dates because they can vary. Basically because like they already have the money, so they can decide when they're doing, when they're dispersing it. In addition, those sites will also have like travel funds sometimes. So if you're looking in the fall for travel in the spring, sometimes they'll have things that are open for that. Okay, that's basically the it for scholarships. Does anybody have any specific questions or any point that I wasn't clear on, which is possible?
Would you suggest looking at both the external and the funding from UW sections right now?
Yes, I would for one or two reasons, and I'll tell you. So, um, in addition to everything else, if you think about funding, you can think about it like three concentric circles, like a bullseye. So, innermost circle is your department funding. Second ring is outside of your department, but still on campus. And then the third ring is fully external funding. So, you should think about those as discrete searches. So, you should be looking for external funding now, that outermost circle. You should be looking at on-campus funding now. Um, and that's that second circle. It's a little easier for departments because they usually email you. But particularly because of these databases, and that includes the external ones and the on-campus, they will show you funding even if the application is not yet open. So the best thing that you can do is do your search as early as possible to find those opportunities, make a note of when the application opens so that you can transition to just applying so that you don't have to, as much as possible, do searching and applying at the same time because you want to be able to use that time, not use it wisely, but like you don't want to have to double up on the amount of time that you're spending on this. So you can transition that chunk of time to applying. But yes, even the on-campus funding, even if it's not open or it opens at a weird time or doesn't disperse, you can still see it and make a note of it, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else? We kind of sped through this a little bit. Oh boy. Um, so I don't, okay, God, this is going to sound really bad. I am getting ready to graduate, so I started deleting everything. Um, so I don't have the particular scholarship Excel anymore because I put what it was and I added it to my resume and then I just don't keep it. So, sorry about that. But basically, basically, I would just have across the top. Actually, I have a spreadsheet for my job applications now. That's what I'm keeping track of. Um, I have the link to the homepage of the scholarship because if you're looking, and I can show you this, which is a great segue. Um, if I look at this one, it has a login. Okay, so there usually has a quick search and an advanced search. I always go to advanced just because. Here is the keywords, and here are the filters that I personally don't use. You can test them for yourself and see. Um, let's see let's just do a quick search. Let's just say public policy. That's going to be too broad, but let's just see what it gives us. Okay, so yes, it gave me 828. That is too many. So a good search is probably between 50 and 80 results. Obviously like 20 would be too few. Over 200 is too many. Sometimes a more narrow result will be better because one of the things that you can do is, let's say this one was interesting to me. If I click into it and scroll down, it gives me some subject information. I can use these to help me brainstorm search terms. If they were similar to me and I thought, "Oh, I never thought about dispute resolution," or like this would be my location, my region from my second set. And so I could look at this and I could say, like, environmental studies, that's what I'm doing. So that goes in my first column of key terms. Location, that would go in my second column of search terms. And I can add those and and then use a search, or I can combine them in different ways because you don't have to just have one term. you can say like public policy Sweden. Like you can, and you don't, it doesn't have to be a sentence. It doesn't have to make sense. It can just be words that are put in there together. But what is interesting about these and the important thing is that this is the program URL. It'll have like to apply here. So on my spreadsheet, I would have the name of what it was. I would have the dollar amount. I would have the link to the specific site, and then a separate link to the application because I might need the description or more information to the website. And then I want a link to my application or my like profile page if that's different. And then I would have down here, if it has contact information, I would record that. I would record when it opens, when it closes, when the notification date is. And this is because I go really overboard, but for me and in general, I will tell you, I think it is important to record that information, especially let's say you're applying for 20 or 25. Like you want to know and you want to keep track. If you're only applying for a couple, that's fine. If you don't want to use a spreadsheet and you just want to copy paste this like into a Word doc, I think that's fine too. For me, it's most important to just make sure I'm recording what it is I've applied to. I may also include what the require or not the requirements, but if they require a personal statement, if they require one or two or three recommenders, and then I'll also list who I had as that recommender. Just for me, all of that information, that's what I'll hang on to. And then my second page will just be my categories of search terms, whatever I'm searching for. Also, because what I'm building is a list, that subject list, similar to what was in the database. I'm building that for myself so that I can, for me, it helps to see the list to further brainstorm. If I see a blank square that says enter a key term, I sometimes have a hard time thinking of things. And so that's kind of where that comes from for me personally. Um, and so the nice thing is if you get a really small search, you can go and look at those subjects and see if any of those key terms will help you. Does anybody have an area of research that we could do a quick search for just to see or anything?
How about like environmental?
Environmental is going to be too broad. So what else do you want to say about it? Like environmental like people like
Let me think. Like we have a like focus area in like environmental
energy.
policy. So that's what I
Okay.
was kind of thinking. Oh,
Environmental
energy.
policy.
We have
Energy
someone
like
in the chat saying
environmental
energy.
energy by itself or environmental energy, would you say? Like I can do a search just for energy. I don't know, or like energy policy, do you think? I can do a search for energy that's going to be too broad, like I can already tell. Ooh, energy policy. Okay, I'll do energy policy and then water resource. Um, oh, that's a really good question, Sarah. Let me get to that. These are all really good, so I'm going to answer them as we go. Energy policy is better, certainly. Okay, so that got me 63. That's not bad. It's 7 pages, so I may just scan these quick, just beginning. Like I'm a real completionist, and so I might go through each page just because and scan them all. And then as I went through, I would say, "Oh, this looks interesting." I'd click on it. I'd read through this and it's like, "No, that's close." I would go here to subjects and then maybe I would further refine. But potentially with 63 results, I might look at them all. And now maybe there will be none, maybe there will be one. If there's one, I pull it, I refine my search, I go again. Um, I do not necessarily recommend using the same search terms each week, particularly because these databases have every opportunity already there. So you're not looking for newly updated or new postings. What you're trying to do each week, well, you're separating it out by week so that it's not like this crazy exhaustive search situation that you're doing. You're breaking it down into bite-sized chunks because it can be really overwhelming. What you're trying to do each week is change your search terms to pull a different set of results, if that makes sense. So you're not looking for anything new, you're looking for a different arrangement of those results. So, one thing that I do recommend when you get started, and then we'll come right back to the search again. On this page, there's a lot of these databases, especially for the larger scholarships. There will be a lot of overlap between these sites. Some of them are like more STEM focused or more humanities focused or policy focused. And so that's fine. And so one of the things that I'll do when I very first start is I'll choose a couple of search terms and I will go through each one of these and do the exact same search. Based on the results, there might be one or two or maybe three databases that have results that I like better, in which case I won't search every single database every time. I may only search two databases all the time because there's enough overlap that I feel like it's not super necessary to do every single one. But that would be my only thing for the week, but definitely change up your search terms for sure. Okay, so we did energy policy, which is pretty good. Now we're going to do water, resources, economics. Let's see. So that got us three. That was what I wondered. Um, that is a little bit too. Oh, let me see. Let me take off the S of resources. Let me see if that does anything. I don't know that it will, but it might. Okay, that got us one more. There we go. So S's make a difference, I guess. Okay. So for this one, number one, it's one of them is a Fulbright, which like is really those are super competitive. So I wouldn't consider like for me personally, that one's not an option. So like it's three, really. My result is three. So I would go into each one of these three. I would scroll down and I would say, okay, how are they talking about it? And this is how they're saying, like, if you use these words, you'll come up with this and other things that are really similar. So I would go through each one and I would look at those key terms and then that's how I would modify my search. And by modify, I would go slightly, maybe one level up, more a little bit more broad. So um, now that may be, gosh, if we just did, let me just see. Well, I don't know if taking off economics is would give us the area that we want to see because that might be number one, I think it's a little too broad, and then that also doesn't bring it within the like public policy umbrella. So just searching for water resource might not be helpful. Is there another way to phrase water resource that we could connect to the word economics? Like, can you think about water resource at a slightly broader level? Water rights? Okay, yeah, for sure. We can search for that one. That helps. Okay, maybe. Let's see. Okay, so that got me nine. And this is a good example of another issue that can happen with these. So if you consider that this search platform is searching, okay, good idea. This search platform is searching within the summaries of these scholarships. Most of these scholarships were developed and posted like 10, 15, 20 or more years ago. So when you think about how you're talking about things, some words or descriptions or phrases are too new and we're talking new, like within the last 10 years, too new, that they won't be listed exactly. So like I understand that water rights has been an issue for a really long time, but that's not necessarily the word that they're using to talk about it. For example, I had a consultation with a student who was in the oceanography department or something, and they were doing some microplastic research. The problem is people weren't really necessarily talking about microplastics back when these scholarships were listed. So when we did that search, it was just kind of too new of a term. So we had to back it up to like ocean pollution and stuff like that. And so then we were able to get closer results because in some ways, when you're having your research funded, you're researching the category, not the actual research itself. So when you're looking for some of these, for instance, the ocean pollution, I'm doing research on ocean pollution, specifically microplastics. So the scholarship would be for that ocean pollution, and then everyone who got the scholarship is doing their own type of research that's associated with it, if that makes sense. Um, Okay, so let us do a environmental economics and let's just see. Well, didn't we search for that? Let's see. Um, okay, so that was the search. Okay, so that got us 57. That is pretty good. If these 57 were not relevant to you, you if you just added another word to that, then it would be way too specific and it would have a hard time. So if you were looking for environmental economics and you didn't find any in this list, I would say that instead of adding a term, you would probably just need to find like think of another way to either talk about economics or environmental and don't add a third word because I don't know that that would be super helpful. So that would be one where you would might have to like go back to the drawing board a little bit and come at it from a different angle, I would say. Yeah. Any cool. Okay. Um, Anybody else? Anything? Okay. Okay, so the question is about tuition waivers with assistantships and the volume. So number one, between quarterly and academic, it doesn't matter. There's no difference. Especially like in the student union contract, they're all considered. It's ASE is the category, and it doesn't matter. Like the length of time, the type of assistantship is not defined. So it's every position is the same. Tuition waiver, and that's also true for fee-based programs. They use tuition kind of interchangeably in that case. It is literally whatever your tuition costs for that quarter. So, um, some of them are like, if it's between these amount of credits, it's this much. If it's this, it's this much. Some of it's um full time is this much, and some of it is per credit. Either way, whatever your total bill is for your tuition, that's what's covered for the waiver. And most of the fees, there's a couple fees that you have to pay. Um, that is a more specific question. Um, Sarah, Kirsten's question was about Handshake, which is available, I believe, which is available to students after they've registered for class. And then Alejandra, do you want to answer Kaylee's question? Because it's a little department specific.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the department, right? So absolutely. For us, the short answer is yes, absolutely. We work with local organizations, agencies, with it like local, state, federal, tribal, and then even sometimes international, depending, for folks, because there is an aspect of an internship kind of encouragement that we have for our program. And so we also have an in-house career coach that can really help, tailor your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn presence, whatever, how you will. So that support system is there to help you connect with internships as well. So that's all in-house for us. There's also some external ones, but again, depending on department or if you're a concurrent student, so having another master's degree alongside Evans, just depends. But yeah, short answer, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. That was going to be my guess because that is something that I do appreciate about the University of Washington is they really do try to grow their industry relationships and they generally do have a good relationship with organizations around Seattle, and so that's one of the nice things that I appreciate about the campus. Any other questions about the search, the assistantships? I can say, if you are not aware, when you're in doing these searches, they will include fellowships and grants as well as scholarships. And so, if you don't know the difference between those, um, all of that is money that you don't have to pay back. Loans are the only thing that you have to pay back. But the main difference is fellowships generally can include a type of work or research element to it, and they generally have a deliverable at the end. So if you're doing research or something, it's like a paper or a project or something like that that you have. So often a fellowship will have a higher dollar amount associated with it because there is something that you kind of have to do. Grants and scholarships, generally that's not the case. It will just be money that comes to support your education, especially in public policy in a couple other places. Sometimes I have found on these databases that a grant may be more geared towards an institution that's offering the service rather than a student who is studying in that field. And so you may find that if it says grant, it may not apply to you. If it says scholarship, it probably does. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that is for this external funding. If we are looking at on-campus funding, which is these two sites, the Merit Scholarship Office and the Graduate School Office, in that instance, if it's a grant, it would be for you as a student because all of the funding on those sites are for students only. So that's just a little bit of information as you're doing your search. You may find those things. Oh, and I should also note that especially and in other places you may find this, but especially on the Graduate School Office of Fellowships and Awards, some of those opportunities is one that your department has to nominate you for. I know there's one in particular. And so, keeping that deadline in mind, what you would do is see that fellowship and say, I absolutely qualify for this. This is amazing. Then you would contact the department and say, I want to have this or apply for this. Will you nominate me? And so, just knowing that, like, that adds into that lead time of that deadline period, that's an extra step that you would have to do. We have time for other questions, or we can do some additional searching. You can ask me questions about what it's like to be a student, or about Seattle if you're not from here, or anything like that. I'm an almost completely open book. And if anybody who came in late has questions about stuff I covered earlier, I can, I'm totally happy to go through it again. That's not a problem.
I'll put the search tool in the chat for folks who join a little bit later to explore as well.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes. Very good.
So, sorry, for the
Mhm.
fall,
No.
I know you said
Mhm.
they start posting assistantships mid-May. So if
Mhm.
we were thinking about how to organize our time, the scholarships, fellowships, and grants link would be the one to kind of focus on more now until mid-May.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's kind of like, yes, you're absolutely focusing on your search now, trying to get things so that you can transition into applying, and then you starting to look for assistantships. Um, Kind of have to think about it like two concurrent wheels, like they're connected sort of, but they are very discrete where, especially if you're going quarter by quarter looking for an assistantship, that search kind of happens on its own over here. And then you're also doing that scholarship search. So yes, at the tail end of that. And then so you're doing your search for scholarships now, then you kind of transition to applying. Some of it's going to be happening at the same time. Then in mid-May, you're looking at assistantships. You're continuing that all the way through the summer. In July and August, you're doing, starting up the scholarship search again for the October to December deadline if you haven't noted those in your previous search. And so you're kind of doing that. So starting in January is always when you're starting to do that search for the scholarships. In August, you're doing that search again. And then around week 7-ish of each quarter, you're starting to look for those assistantships. And that information, to a certain extent, is available on this if we go to the left side of the menu on the timelines and definitions. Some of that, which takes us to this page, gives you a little bit of this information broadly that we talked about. So if you are planning your calendar and you need a refresh, there is some of this information listed. And if at any time you want to check in and make sure that your timeline is right and you're doing a search at the correct time, you can send me an email, gfis@uw.edu, and just say, like, this is what I'm doing now. This is what my plan is for the next couple months. Is that right? And I'll say, yes, absolutely. Or like, add this in, or like, change this to this time, or whatever. That's fine too.
Any other questions coming up, friends? Yeah, absolutely. So we recorded today, absolutely because we know it's like during like the lunch hour. So we wanted folks, who weren't able to join us. If you registered, we'll get you the link. Absolutely. This was really helpful, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us. I know I can't speak on everyone's experience of group, but it was really insightful to kind of get a better understanding, especially how funding, for us, our MPA or a master's degree, like really looks like. For some of us, we've just graduated maybe in our undergrad, but for some folks,
Yeah.
it's maybe we've had some seasons,
Hmm.
So thank
Hmm.
you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us, truly. Can we give a nice virtual round of applause to our
Thank you.
phenomenal guest speaker, Michelle, today? Thank you. Thank you. If you have any parting
Yeah.
words, Michelle, please, please take it away.
Yes, thank you guys. I'm so glad that you were here. Funding education is really important to me as a first gen student. I didn't know any of this when I started, and so I am especially dedicated to making sure people understand how to fund their education. And so I'm glad that it was helpful to you. Please feel free to email me, as I said, and look on this site. It is as helpful as I could possibly make it. So hopefully, good luck, and hopefully, we'll see you in the fall.